Hello, Miss Williams back again. I'd like you to just write a short paragraph now about how the writer creates tension. And I know that you've done this before in the lessons that you've done with Mrs. Reed and with Mrs. Deutsch. I would like you to follow the same concept, and this is just taken off of your knowledge organiser, and it's taken from lessons you've previously done. So you should be able to do this already. You're just adapting the way you write. You're adapting now to include this particular text. So first of all, using the 5-step process, how does the writer create tension? So it's a really good idea to write that question out so that you know you're always coming back to and answering that question. You start with an overview of how the writer presents the setting to create tension. So you would say, give an overall description of what kind of tension you're feeling, what kind of emotion you're feeling as a reader. Then secondly, you include words and phrases from the text as evidence to back up what you're saying. So if you're saying that it's cold, you need to give, a sense of the words that make you feel cold. 3, a general overview of what you can infer from the text. So what does this show? 4, a more specific explanation of how the writer uses this particular word or phrase or punctuation or whatever it is you're writing about. Maybe it's used in contrast with something else. Maybe it's used in order to create connotations, to make you think other things. And finally, why you think the writer chose those words and phrases. It's really important for us as students to really accept the fact that no writer will ever do anything for no reason, even if when that writer is not entirely consciously aware when they're writing. Nothing is done for no reason. They will have some kind of idea in their head that they want to portray, and it's for us to try and understand and explore that. So if you need it, here is a writing frame that you can pause and use to help you to write this. So there are some sentence stems to help you if you're a little bit stuck, and you don't need gaps between the sentences. This should be written as a continuous paragraph, but here are the beginnings of the 5 sentences, the 5-step process. So pause here if you need to. So here's just a little point here in summary. This is what I would have said, something like this, although I'm not using this 5-step process. What I'm doing is just summarising my ideas. I would have said that the writer sets the scene using stereotypical horror genre tropes, like a graveyard at midnight. You can see there that the words graveyard and midnight are both words taken from the text, so realistically, if you're writing about them, you need to use quotation marks. Because we associate these things with the horror genre, so in our minds we instantly recognise that something bad might happen, and this makes the reader begin to feel tense. It creates a sense of foreboding. Now, I know I've spoken to you about this word foreboding before, so this is just a recap on that, but the word foreboding is brilliant. It's an abstract noun, so it's perfect for using when discussing connotations, and it's a strong inner feeling or notion, idea of a future misfortune or evil. So if you feel a sense of foreboding, you feel like something bad is going to happen. And I think that is a perfect word to describe horror as a genre, because the majority of the things that make horror scary is not the bits where there's actually action, it's the bit leading up, the tension, the feeling that, oh my god, something bad is going to happen. That is the foreboding. So if you haven't yet written your paragraph, you could include some of this with it, but we're going to move on now, because I want to talk about now the character. So she's a really interesting character, this lady who is, we don't know who she is. She's introduced with this really short sentence, and then I saw her, which is really punchy and gets straight to the point. We're really sort of like, she's really thrown at us as a character. So I'd like you to answer the questions below, and you can see that I've highlighted certain parts of her character description. I've highlighted the clothes she wears, the garment, which is clothing, of pale silvery grey. I assume that's a dress. The expression on her face of distress, something is wrong with her. And then the way that she comes towards him, seeming about to plead with him, so almost like to beg for help, but then a blank and glassy look, so almost like she's lifeless in her face and expression. And then this really interesting idea that the nearer she came, the greater the cold Hugh feels, the narrator feels. So it's almost like she is making him cold, but at this moment he struggles to kind of place those two things together, which the fact that he says, "I did not link it to the young woman," suggests that it is the young woman doing it, but he just doesn't recognise it at that point. Sometimes when we're reading, we're looking for not what it explicitly says, but what it doesn't say, or the opposites that show us what is really happening. And in this case, the fact that he does not immediately link it to the woman means that in reality it is the woman making him cold. Now I'd like you to pause here and answer these questions. So number one, look at the way the writer describes the woman's clothing. And what can you infer, or what connotations are associated with this clothing? The fact that it's pale silvery grey, do those colours, that image in your mind, does it have any sort of like other associations? Or the fact that this compound adjective of gauze-like is being used, a compound adjective that in lesson 1 we discussed, thin like bandages. Why is that so important? Think about the genre and think about what things you're kind of thinking as you read it. Number 2, now look at the way her face and expression is described. What can you infer from her face? So think about the changes in her expression. There's distress to pleading to blank and glassy. So some really interesting things to write about there. And then 3, now look at how the narrator reacts to her. Now, what is the effect created for the reader? What do we feel? What atmosphere is created by the fact that he feels colder when she gets closer to him? Some really interesting things for you to think about now. So I would take your time with this, pause and have a think. Now, if you are getting to the point where this is taking you 30, 40 minutes, I would just stop here, but if you feel like you've got some more time in you, then carry on. So this is a moment that if you've answered the questions and this has taken you a long time, I'd be happy for you to skip this because you've already done this process, but I think it's good practice, particularly for GCSE, to write these paragraphs because it will really help you in preparation for next year when you're really doing this quite frequently. So using the 5-step process, here are the sentence stems again. How does the writer create tension? In this case, with the introduction of this character. So instead of focusing on setting, focus on this woman. The writer presents the female character as. So even if you just use that sentence, I would like you to write about this. Now, the final thing I'm going to look at is this last paragraph, which really interests me. I think it's fantastic. And I'd like you to answer these 3 questions. So, why do you think the writer included this long and confusing sentence? What do they want you to feel? So, how does the writer want us to feel, to think the narrator feels at this point? So, the way that the sentence is constructed is to replicate the emotions of the narrator because it is him speaking, him telling the story, and so the fact that he's telling the story in this long, confusing sentence that barrels on and on without a break, how does he feel at this moment? And what is the effect on the reader? So how do you as a reader then start to feel? Do you empathise with this character? Do you feel what he feels? Do you feel that sense? Now, in this box here I've said, when you read the sentence aloud, do you get breathless? I know I did. Do you think this could be trying to make the reader feel a certain way? Does the writer want the reader to feel the same way the narrator does? So what is he feeling at this moment? And why is that so tense? Why does that create tension? This on and on sentence that's kind of like without break, without pause, just lots of different thoughts just barreling out like a kind of stream of consciousness. Why has he chosen to do that, and why has Susan Hill chosen that? Sorry. So the final task, if you've got time for it, is to look at this final paragraph and how it creates tension, how it feels like something exciting or negative or scary, something is about to happen. Why do we feel that by this last paragraph? So using those sentence stems if you want to. I think that's our last slide. So well done. Tomorrow's lesson will be a bit of creative writing, so you'll get a chance to put all of the things you've learned into your own piece of really horror genre tension writing.